Hi, I'm Gareth Evans. I'm a retired physics teacher, a pastor, a missionary, and itinerant for many years, traveling and speaking at youth conferences and pastors' conferences in many parts of the world. As I look back over my long life, I see so many stepping stones where God placed before me to direct me into walking into His will. I never saw them ahead of me, but I see many, many of them as I look back. And I'd like to share some of those stepping stones with you. Join me on this journey as I tell some of my stories. God bless you. I taught at the Hebrew Academy in Toronto from 1977 to 1979. I very, very much enjoyed being at the school. I was treated very well, and the salary was excellent, and I made many, many good friends there. I'll tell you another story how I left there to become a pastor in my first church. But I want to tell a little story that happened on the last spring break while I was at the school. Some grade 11 students came to me and said, "Mr. Evans, would you come with us? We're on a field trip for a long weekend to Quebec City." And I said, "Well, I'd love to very much, but I don't think I would be allowed to because I don't know anything about kashrut. That's the rules, the dietary rules that all Jews, practicing Jews want to obey, and I knew nothing about them. So I couldn't be responsible for them saying they could eat this hamburger, and I didn't know if they could or not. So I declined the offer. But the next day, the principal, Mr. Diamond, came to me and said, "Mr. Evans, the grade 11 students would like for you to take them to Quebec City on the long weekend at the end of the spring term." He said, "Would you be willing?" I said, "Well, I'd love to," but I gave the same reason. He said, "We need to send somebody else with you, and Ari Rabakai would like to come with you." Now, in my other story, I've told about how Ari was the one who invited me into his class to speak to grade 13 students about the Christian faith. This is just 4 weeks later that we're going to go away for this long weekend in Quebec City. So I said I would, and 1 hour after sundown on the Sabbath, we climbed into a bus outside the school and proceeded on the long journey to Quebec City. Ari and I sat in the seat behind the driver, and we got into conversation while the students were probably sleeping because it was over nighttime that we were traveling. Next morning, we were at Montreal in the capital, the major city, and we're sitting on the lawn outside the Hotel de Frontenac, a very popular tourist place, eating our kosher sandwiches. A young man comes up to me and he said, "Excuse me, are you the party from the Toronto Hebrew Academy?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, my name is Jean-Marc Deneau, and I'm going to be a tour guide for this weekend." I said, "Wonderful. Welcome, John. It's good to meet you." Then I offered him a sandwich, and I said, "Would you like one of these sandwiches? They're kosher, but they're very, very tasty." And he said, "No, thank you." He said, "I don't want one now." I said, "Well, I'm personally not a Jew," I said, "but I'm..." Again, I made the sort of comment. I said, "An evangelical Christian." And John's eyes lit up. He said, "Oh, so am I. I'm a born-again Christian. How wonderful." And so he and I immediately became close friends on the whole weekend. And we had a wonderful time together. And one of the highlights I remember was walking into Notre Dame Cathedral and leading my students in to show them the inside of this very famous basilica, cathedral in the city of Quebec. And so as I got in, I suddenly realized there was a silence came upon the students because of the Stations of the Cross and the statues they saw there, which to them would be very, very difficult to understand from a Jewish perspective. So I just quietly walked through with my students at the front, and I went out through a side door to lead out. I then realized on the pavement outside that there were only 2 or 3 of us together there. The rest were still inside the cathedral. So I turned around to go back in, and Jean-Marc Deneau had got them all sitting in 2 rows in the pews, and he's explaining to them the Stations of the Cross and the life of Jesus. This young man was really taking it to them, speaking about the Christian faith and what we believe. And this is quite wonderful for me to watch grade 11 students. And Ari was sitting there also, Ari Baka, the teacher. So we left there and we had a pretty wonderful time in Quebec City. I remember one little highlight. We were allowed to go into a disco a few hours before it was officially opened, and we were allowed in so long as we bought a drink, which was like a bottle of Coca-Cola for $1 a piece, whatever. That was our entrance fee. And of course, I got on the disco floor and I did my shuffling around and then pretended to crawl off exhausted. And one of the boys said to me, "Oh, of course, sir, you're a real cool, funky dude." I thought it was a great compliment. Anyway, we had a wonderful weekend. and we took the bus back to Toronto. And it's a long journey, many hours. And we're driving past Scarborough, which is where I live on the east side of Toronto. And it's quite late at night, 11 o'clock-ish. And I thought to myself, if I jump off the bus here, Anne can come and pick me up and I'll be home in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Then I stopped and I said, no. I better go all the way just in case there's some problems when we get to our destinations, because it's very late at night. And maybe some of the students will not be, their parents will be there. So I need to be there to help Ari back in this last moment. So I stayed on the bus. And needless to say, when we got to the school, every parent was there. And within 10 minutes, I was standing alone on the sidewalk with the bus driver. Now, to get there from there to my home is a good hour and a half journey. It takes 2 buses and 2 subway trips right across the city of Toronto. The bus driver said to me, so where are you going, Gareth? And I told him, he said, well, look, I have to take the bus downtown Toronto. Why don't you come with me? That'll save you 1 bus trip and 1 subway journey. Half my time to be home. So I thought, wonderful. So I went with him on the bus downtown. The bus driver said to me, so Mr. Evans, where do you have to go? And I told him the other side of Scarborough, and 2 buses and 2 subways. And he said, look, I have to take the bus downtown Toronto. Why don't you come with me? I'll save you 1 subway and 1 bus trip. I said, oh, wonderful. And take me half the time to get home. I sat near him at the front of the bus as we began the journey into the city centre. And he said, while I've been driving, he said, I've been listening to you and Ari talking all the time. Could we sat right behind him? And he said, I've been watching a program on television recently called 100 Huntley Street. Have you heard of that? I said, oh, yes. He said, I've been very impressed. A lot of people there say that you can know your sins forgiven and you can have peace with God. And are they real? I said, oh, yes, they're real. I said, it's my own personal experience too. They're real. We began to talk. At the end of the journey, as I left the bus, we prayed together for him to receive the Lord. That made the whole weekend so very wonderful. It was a really wonderful weekend. And then, of course, next morning I go back to school, and immediately I get there, I'm called into the headmaster's office. Mr. Diamond said to me, Gareth, he said, I've just been inundated with telephone calls from the parents of the students who went to Quebec City. And they all want to thank you for the students saying it was the most wonderful trip they ever take. And, I think it probably was, with Ari back and I listening and talking all the time about the Lord. Then John McDonough giving a witness to all those students in Notre Dame Cathedral. And then the bus driver coming to receive Christ as a Savior. It certainly couldn't have been much better than that.